Hey guys, how you going? Alright, moving on to the next fact. Okay, next fact. Throat irritation, need to cough. Now, I personally witnessed this myself. Best example I can give to you in regards to explaining what I mean by this is at my place of employment, we would hold regular toolbox meetings or work meetings. Now, I'd show up to these meetings late, so everyone was in the meeting, the lecturer, the bosses, and my fellow employees. Now, the meeting has already started to take place, and I would show up late. I'd walk in the door, and the meeting would stop. Now, they'd all turn and look at me, so all eyes were on me. Now, generally when people do this, you yourself may have found yourself in this situation where you've shown up or arrived late to a meeting or something like that, that all eyes stop and look at you. And that's normally directed in a negative fashion. Now, most people, when they'd walk in, they'd get all eyes on them in a negative fashion. They'd be all, oh, sorry, and then take their seat. Me, however, I'm quite different. I will quite easily walk into a meeting late, knowing that I'm most likely going to be in trouble for it. Walk in the door, as soon as the meeting stops, everyone stops, stares at me in a negative fashion. I would either say a joke or pull a stupid face or start dancing on the spot. Just do something silly and crazy, you know. And what it actually does is everyone then would relax a bit and have a bit of a laugh. Like, oh, Jimmy, you're an idiot. You're silly, you know. Take a seat. Hurry up. Take a seat. So by me not going in there being, oh, sorry, and actually adding to a negative environment, I actually changed the whole dynamic of the mentality of the people that were in there into more of a positive, relaxed state. Now, I personally noticed that sometimes during these meetings, the bosses would be up and it was almost like a drill sergeant talking to the workers. It'd be, right, you will do this, you will do that, you will be responsible, you will be held liable, we must do this, must do that. Now, this was on a regular basis. They would talk to the workers like this, which was very, you know, oppressing and chaining the workers down and making them feel worthless, you know. This, mind you, was done under Archon influence. They do this deliberately to basically put you in a negative mind state, to doubt yourself, to feel down, you know, to feel oppressed and chained down. Now, while I'd be in these meetings and this was happening, mind you, now at the time I was unaware of the Archons. I was just being myself. But while the bosses were doing things like this, I would speak up and say something just silly, stupid, or I'd crack a joke or do something at my own expense to basically undermine the boss at the time. And I found it quite funny actually, because the boss has gone from negative to a drill sergeant attitude to just going, oh, Jimmy, you're an idiot, shut up and just let me finish. So he'd go from negative to drilling the workers to relaxed, have a little bit of a laugh, and then go, oh, Jimmy, and his whole dynamic, his whole energy, his attitude had changed. Now, I was doing these sorts of things prior to my understanding or even knowing about the Archon's existence. So what I've learned is by me doing these sorts of things is I was actually changing the environment, the energy of these meetings. Now, by me doing these things, the Archons there that were present acting through the bosses or the people that were higher up, the CEOs, the top bosses, you know, people that were at the higher chain of command within the company I was working for, they did not like this. The reason is the Archons were acting through the hierarchy to basically put the workers down, you know, to basically chain them down, oppress them, put them in a negative state. They were harvesting negative energy off a group, off a collective. By me coming in on my own and being myself and having a joke and being quick-witted and funny, it was actually changing the whole environment. Even the boss that was there and supposed to be, you know, enforcing these rules and regulations upon us, even their whole mentality and energy would change. And from going to, you will do this, you will do that, they would change to, oh, look, guys, look, we've really all got to work together and try and, you know, let's all try and band together and make this company successful and, you know, do our best to look after each other. And so he's gone from a drill sergeant to like a brother, so to speak, like a brother to us all. It was quite interesting to see and watch. And really at the time, I never really noticed. I just was being myself. But I've since learned by doing these things at the meetings, the Archons did not like. They would be hitting me with a constant niggling need to cough in the throat. So When I'd do this and pick everyone's spirits up, all of a sudden I'd be in this meeting and feel the need to cough. 2 seconds later, cough again, then cough again. It got to a point where over an hour-long meeting, the need to cough was that constant and regular. I would literally have to get up, excuse myself, walk out of the conference room, have a good cough, maybe a small drink from the bubbler or the water fountain, then come back in, take a seat. A couple of minutes later, it would be back. I've since realised and learnt that this was the Archons attacking me. This is one of their means and tactics that they can perform upon you. So if you're actually a fun-loving person and you're the type of person where you'll go into these meetings and actually make people laugh and pick their spirits up, you may very well find yourself in the same situation where the Archons will do these sorts of things to attack you. Something to be aware of and quite possibly keep your eye out for. I can assure you it is very true, and it's one of their capabilities. Alright, next fact. I've had them mention to me before home invasion. Now, when they mentioned it, I wasn't really sure what they meant by this. I was thinking they're going to try and manipulate someone or host someone and get them to break into my house, my property, and steal goods, or quite possibly get someone to try and kick my door in and physically harm me. So I waited at home. I waited at home and waited it out, thinking, well, if they're going to try and send someone into my house and do these sorts of things, steal from my house or physically hurt me, well, boy, have they got a fight on their hands, because I was ready. I was waiting for it. Funnily enough, that never actually happened. What did happen was I was sitting in my kitchen, or standing in my kitchen, I should say, looking out the window, having a cup of coffee and a quick cigarette. Now, I noticed this elderly woman started walking down the street. She had an umbrella, and mind you, that day it wasn't rainy at the time, but it was very gloomy and overcast with a good possibility of rain. This elderly woman was walking along, then all of a sudden it's gone like this. And I found it quite odd. I wasn't sure what was happening. And then all of a sudden she stopped, looked directly at my kitchen window and started walking towards me and my house. As she's walking to the house, her face just went evil. She's gone like... So her face and what she was saying, I'm sure it wasn't good. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant. I couldn't hear her because I was inside my house and she was outside on the street. But by the look on her face, I know what she said was not pleasant. So she's done that and then snapped back out of it and then carried on her way, walking. Pretty much almost instantaneously after she had done this, my house had filled with a stench of what appeared to be like raw sewage, like a busted sewage pipe had spewed sewage all through my house. My house reeked of sewage. Showed up pretty much instantaneously, stayed around for a few minutes, and then disappeared as quickly as it showed up. I've since learnt that basically this is what they meant by home invasion. One of their capabilities. You may or may not have witnessed this yourself, but I can assure you it is very true, and it's something they did do to me. Alright, moving on. Alright, this is an interesting fact. If you are awake to them, they will spit on the ground around you. What I mean by this is, because I'm aware of them and I can sense, feel and know their presence when it's around me, they do not like this. Basically, they do not like any of us. They especially do not like me because I'm aware of them. Now, on a daily basis, I will get this. I'll be walking down a street, a crowded street, you know, things like that, where I'll be walking along, someone will be coming in my heading towards me, but in the opposite direction, crossing my path. Now, the moment that person will get within close enough proximity or within my eyesight, they'll be walking along, and then all of a sudden, when they're in front of me, go and spit on the ground. This happens to me regularly, almost on a daily basis. What that basically is that's an Archon acting through that person to basically try and provoke me to, you know, rise a response out of me. Now, that person generally, they won't even realise. They'll just be walking along and feel the need to, oh, I've got to spit. But what it actually is it's an Archon acting through that person to basically insult me, disrespect me. Their mentality is we spit on you. Like I said, they hate all of us. They hate me even more because I'm aware of them. So if you find yourself where you are in tune to them and you've witnessed them, you know of their presence, you can feel and sense when they are around, You will notice this will happen to you quite regularly, where when you're around people, they will spit on the ground around you. It's not them, they're not doing it to provoke you, the person. It's the Archon acting through them that is doing it to basically insult you. They're quite classy, they're charming spirits, entities, but that's just their mentality. They're quite nasty and crude with the things they do. Alright, moving on. Next fact. Online videos. Watch the eyes and you will see. So the best way I can explain this is, you'll notice online videos, things like that, where you'll see people that have the reptilian slitted eyes or the blackened out eyes, or their eyes, their pupils will shapeshift and change. This is a good indication of Archon hosting. I myself have put up some videos on my channel, so feel free to check them out if you like, which shows perfect examples of this happening. Best explanation I can give to you is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the television series called Stargate, where they could travel through these stargates and travel to different worlds and things like that. And you actually had the race of people called the Goa'uld, and they would have a symbiote within them. When the symbiote would take over to communicate through the Goa'uld, you'll notice their eyes will flick and change. This is very similar, almost identical, exactly the same as when an Archon hosting is taking place. You'll notice that people's eyes will flick and the shape will change, or they'll have blackened out eyes or reptilian eyes. This is Archons hosting, or manipulating, or basically connected to these people. That's a good telltale sign, and I can assure you it is very true. Moving on. Okay, next fact. Hallucinations, black eyes and facial projections. I myself have personally witnessed this. When I first encountered these Archons, I was at my place of employment where I'd been there for several years. Made lots of friends there, These were friends that I'd grown to admire and enjoy their company and, love as a friend. I would walk up to them and go to talk or say hello, and they'd be looking at me and they'd have reptilian eyes or completely blackened out eyes. I got this on a regular basis. I'd be walking through a shopping mall or a shopping centre, and I'd notice crowds of people would be staring at me and their eyes were black. Their eyes were black. I noticed this on a very regular basis. In regards to facial projections, I actually had a friend at work who, he didn't know, but he actually had one permanently attached to him. I've tried to sit down and have a talk to him and have a bit of a chat in regards to this topic and about these Archons, about these things with him. He didn't know that he had one permanently attached to him, but when I was trying to talk to him about it, he just was not interested. He was not interested, and I respected that. I respected his wishes. He wasn't ready. He wasn't interested, so I left it at that. I at least felt I should try to explain some of these things to him. Well, anyway, this friend, when I'd be at work, he'd be saying nasty things. Now, I knew it was the Archon acting through him, trying to provoke and taunt me, but he was none the wiser. But anyway, this friend, right, so I'd be walking down the street, knowing that he was nowhere near where I was. I'd be walking down the street and I could feel the presence of someone staring at me. I'd look across the road, and there'd be someone standing there, staring me straight in the eyes, but his face was projected onto their body. Now, I know it wasn't him simply because of the structure, the way they stood and posture. I knew that it wasn't him, but it was his face projected onto that person. Another scenario, I pulled up at a set of traffic lights in my vehicle, my car, stopped, and a push bike rider had ridden past the front of my car. As they're riding past the front of my car, they've looked down at me, and it was his face projected onto that person again. Another scenario was my son, my child. He was at hospital, required some treatment. So I was at the hospital with him, and while standing in the hospital, this woman came and stood to my right. Now, where she stood, she was basically within my personal space. It was very close, almost shoulder to shoulder. And I didn't really pay much attention. Then all of a sudden I felt the static and pins and needles go up my back. And I thought, oh no. And I've looked to my right where she was, and she was staring at me. It was his face projected onto that woman. It's quite strange, quite remarkable. I can assure you it is very true. It was a male's face projected onto a woman's body. This is one of their capabilities. I've got to admit, it's quite remarkable. It's very amazing that they are able to do this, but I can assure you it is very true and they are capable of doing it. Alright, moving on. Window reflections reveal things too. This same friend that I was just telling you about from work, we were sitting out in the smoking area. Now, he was just sitting down, mind you, no change in facial expression or anything like that. He was just sitting down having a smoke at the tables and chairs. Now, the way he was actually facing a window. Now, I was there having a smoke too, and I felt the need to look at the window. Now, I wasn't directly beside him or behind him, I was a few metres off to the side. Now, I've looked into the window and his reflection was looking straight at me, even though he was facing directly at the window and I was nowhere within that range for him to be looking straight at me. I've looked in the window and the reflection of the face staring straight back at me was terrifying. I've got to be honest. Blackened out eyes, and the best way I could show you the face staring at me was pretty much like this. It was nasty, mouth open, just the face of evil, the pure face of evil. That was staring straight back at me. So this is something I personally witnessed and know to be true, that if they choose to, they can actually use reflections, window reflections, to reveal some appearance to you. This was done to try and intimidate me and scare me, and I've got to be honest, at first it did. It scared me quite a bit, but this is something they are capable of doing, so best if you keep an eye out, and if you're in tune to them and know of their existence and are aware of them, you will notice that this may very well happen to you. Alright, moving on. Okay, feminine and masculine. Now, I had an Archon through this hosted friend, this same friend at work, mentioned to me feminine and masculine, and at the time I wasn't really sure what he meant by this. I was sort of a bit baffled. I've since learnt and realised that in regards to feminine and masculine aspects is they appear to rule with what seems to be a masculine mentality. Excuse me. So they're the type to put it over you. Raw, sort of intimidating and, fear-mongering, and their mentality is very masculine. They will put it over you. If you're too feminine, they will walk over you. If you're masculine, then they will use you for their purpose, their agenda, their means. So to use you to manipulate, put fear in people, dictate to people, put it over people. If you're, like I said, too feminine, well, they're going to walk over you and put you in fear and things like that. In regards to the feminine and masculine aspects, I've since learned that balance is the key. You need to, within yourself, achieve balance. Basically, if you achieve balance between masculine and feminine, you are basically putting yourself in a better position to be able to defend against their tactics, their manipulations and their taunts. So what I mean by this is just enough masculine to stand your ground and basically say to them, look, back up. Still a good balance of feminine in there to try and be a good person, a caring person, considerate and compassionate. By achieving balance between feminine and masculine, you are in a better position to defend yourself against them. That's what the aspects of feminine and masculine mean. Alright, moving on. Alright, this one's very interesting. Sneezing and people saying, bless you. Now, where I'm from in Australia, it's a thing that's been slowly removed from society by the Archons, but generally it's a common courtesy thing where if someone sneezes, another person will go, bless you. Now, have you ever noticed when someone sneezes, another person will go, oh, bless you, in a negative sense? No. The reason that people sort of sneezing and someone else saying bless you was slowly, I've noticed it's being removed from society. I'm noticing it more and more every day. These old school values are being removed. The reason is when someone sneezes and you go, oh, bless you, you're basically saying bless you, but in a positive sense, in a positive fashion. You've added a positive attachment to those words, to that blessing. And instantly you'll notice the person will go, oh, thank you. Because they know within themselves that you've done it in a positive light. This is being removed from society for that reason. They're doing it quite sneakily and cleverly, right under everyone's noses. It's only the people who are raised with old school values, old-fashioned values, that will still do these things. I've noticed it's slowly being removed because By you saying, "Oh, bless you," in a positive fashion, you're actually giving your positive energy to that person and lifting them up. I've also noticed that the Archons do not like it when you say, "Oh, bless you." They do not like it. You don't even have to verbally say it. Just thinking it aggravates them. The best I can say is by you saying, "Oh, bless you." Now, I've noticed people at work, friends, things like that, that have had one attached to them permanently or temporarily. Just by me looking at them and thinking the words, "bless you," the Archons do not like. The best way I can explain is pretty much by doing this, it's like you giving them a whack across the nose. They do not like it. So if you do notice that friends, family, or people around you are actually hosted by an Archon and are teasing and taunting you, you don't even have to verbally say it. Just think it within your mind, do it with a positive attachment, not nasty, but in your mind, look at them and think to yourself, "bless you." And they do not like it. The Archons do not like it, and it will drive them away. Alright, I'll wrap this video up for now. If you like, carry on to the next video and I'll share some more information with you all. Thank you very much for your time.